beginning.
Welcome to the Grief Dreams podcast. My name is Sean Ram alongside Dr. Joshua Black. Good morning, Dr. Black. How are you today?
I'm good, Sean. How you doing?
Pretty good. Nice and alert. Happy to be here and happy to interview another person, another interesting, compelling interview. We love doing this. And again, thank you to all the listeners across the globe. We see that you guys are listening, and we just hope that we're putting out content that you enjoy. And once again, thank you for, tuning in. So without much delay, we have on today with us Kayla Moryoussef, and she is a community worker, registered social service worker from Toronto who has been volunteering and working in end-of-life palliative care for over 7 years. She is a death educator, death doula candidate with Home Hospice Association, and project manager for all of their death cafés across Southern Ontario. Kayla truly believes in the profound power of a good death and its lasting effects on healthy individuals, families, and communities at large. At the age of 15, Kayla's life was profoundly changed by bearing witness to the death of her grandmother, a primary parent and one of the most formative figures in her life to this date. And you can find her work at gooddeath.ca and on Instagram, Good Death Doula, Facebook, Good Death Doula, and you can email her, Kayla@gooddeath.ca. Kayla, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. We'll just quickly begin with, we actually met before, and we met at the Death Symposium.
Yeah, the International Death Symposium. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty good. We had a good conversation, and I remember being very interested in the death doula field because I've never really heard about it before in detail until we met. So again, it's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, do you guys want me to kind of break down a bit what the death doula is?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to definitely get into that and all the other good things that you do. First, we just wanted to actually go start from the beginning and how you got into you started with the home hospice care. Is that correct?
Yeah, I started doing home hospice care with Hospice Toronto. So they offer in-home palliative care. They send volunteers into the home to offer respite to family members who are caregiving for their loved ones who are dying.
Amazing. And what made you get into that field?
I will be honest with you. I was looking for a volunteer experience that would send me right into the field. And at the time, I had no credentials and no experience. And Home Hospice was willing to train you. They did 40 hours of training and send you into the field into a client-caregiver relationship. And I thought, this is amazing. I have absolutely no experience, and they're willing to train me and send me right into the field. What an amazing opportunity. So I went and I did the training, and it just spoke to me. I was like, something just went, like a light bulb went off, like it's kind of when you see in the cartoons, that light bulb moment. That's what happened for me. And I was like, this is it. This is built. I was built for this. This is what I want to be doing. But I also had kind of a lot of fear when I did the training that even though it was really speaking to me in the training, was it going to translate when I went into the homes of the clients? Was I going to be able to do this thing that I was so passionate about learning? And luckily it did translate. And when I was in the homes with the people, what I had learned about kind of in books and in class applied in person in real life as well. So that's how it got started for me, was that somebody was willing to give me a chance. That's
very interesting. And that's a very accurate statement about what happens sometimes, because I remember going through school and sometimes you don't know whether what you learn or what you're doing, what you're learning about theoretically and, what the actual reality of it is. You don't know if you'll like both. And yeah, I could see that with the field, especially you're talking about taking care of people. It's one thing to kind of understand it, but it's a different thing to kind of get in there. So tell me a little more in detail. What was it like when you were actually in there, and what was that difference like?
Well, my first client was, it was an overnight client, and which is rare. It's not the common case that you have an overnight client, but that was the one they offered to me because it was in my neighborhood. And I would actually most of the time just go watch movies with his wife. She wanted company, and that's how it worked out. So it was offering respite. She would either to finally take her sleep, or I was watching movies with her, and I would stay up and lay next to him. They had brought a hospital bed into his room, so they kind of like set it up at the end of life. They set it up almost like a hospital room, and I would just lay next to him, and I wouldn't sleep. I think I could have, but I was too afraid to sleep, and I wouldn't sleep, and I would just be there and hold space for that person to sleep and to do. I mean, when he woke up, it was really beautiful, actually. I remember I would always walk in, and even though he was dying, he would always like wake up and ask me how I was. And then he would go back to sleep, and I would just sit there and be there with him. And each week when I showed up, he was less, less there, less present, less physically there, less physically capable. And then I remember the last week I showed up, I just had a feeling that it was my last week there, my last week seeing him. And I was right. I got a call a couple of days later, and as soon as the phone rang, I was like, my client died. I looked at my mom, I was with her, and I was like, my client died. I have a feeling that's what this call's about. And I was right. And that's that was my first experience, and I felt so empowered by it. I felt so privileged. It's like, who am I? I'm just a stranger, and I'm being invited into this person's house at this most vulnerable time in their life.
Yeah, that is a special moment because a lot of times people have these walls up around them. It's hard to get that personal with someone so quickly, but you're able to do that, and it's amazing that they're able to let you in. Because I'm guessing
Yeah,
they have to sign off. You're not just there for their caregiver; they're signing off that you're allowed to be there as they die too.
of course. Yeah, yeah. And I really do feel privileged. I feel so lucky. I feel I don't know like what I did to get so lucky, to be honest. Because I'm overwhelmed with this feeling of who am I? Like this is really the most vulnerable time in a person's life, in a family's life, and I'm just being invited into their homes, which it's I think even more personal and more intimate than a hospital room or a hospice.
Did you find it challenging at all? Because I know sitting with people suffering can be challenging. So was there ever an issue? Have you got better at that, or have you just always just had knack for being and providing that space?
Well, they taught me something really amazing in my training, or I mean, it came out of my training. And one of the things that really sat with me or stuck with me was that this is not my sadness. This is not my story. I have a job to do. And that is a really powerful thing. Like if I take on this sadness, who's going to do this job? And so that's one thing that I really, really hold on to when I'm going to perform this job. And then the other piece is that yes, there's suffering, and yes, it's sad, but the way I see it is like this is going to be an unfortunate time in life. But I get to make it a little less unfortunate. I get to make it a little less horrible. And so that's just another reason in which I feel privileged and lucky.
Yeah, it's incredible when you think about it, because I would imagine that that's you. That again, you just said it. That's you early on in your career, and if I'm just thinking about like young people doing volunteering jobs, and there's such a gap between like impact and like really like I guess how serious it is, but also how fulfilling and what it really is. Like what you talked about, like you didn't feel worthy that to come witness someone's death, and some kids are out there mowing lawns for volunteering work or whatever, coaching kids baseball. I'm not saying those things aren't important, but like
Hmm.
here you are like kind of sitting with someone at that point in their life. Did that impact you moving forward and maybe solidify something, or you obviously had to make a decision at that point, is this is me or this is not me?
Well, yeah, I honestly think everyone's built for something. My mom is an artist. My sister's an architect. I can't do what they do, but I can do this.
Mm.
And so that's just how I feel. I feel like everyone's built for something, and I happen to find what I was built for. And as I look back on my life, there are times where I felt like or I see that I had already been doing this type of work. And I thought it kind of started with the death of my grandmother, but my mom said it started earlier, and with an incident when I was in grade 4. And I think she might be right. So, I think everyone's built for something. This just happens to be what I'm built for. It just makes sense to me. Incidentally, it's really funny because it wasn't until this opportunity to speak with you came up. It was a grief dream, or not quite a grief dream, but I had this dream or this nightmare about a peer of mine in class in grade 4 that his dad was dying in the hospital, and I was in the hospital. I'd never met his dad before, and I'd never met his stepmom before, but I was in the hospital with his dad and his stepmom, and his dad was dying, and they were all there crying, and I was trying to comfort them, and I didn't know what to do. And I woke up and it was so vivid that it really affected me, and I was really upset. And all morning I was crying and crying. I told my mom about the dream, and I didn't want to go to school, and I didn't want to do anything. I just didn't know what to do with myself, and I was beside myself. I was so upset about the dream. And we went to school, and my mom told my teacher that I had this really distressing dream, and so that's why I'm out of sorts today. And my teacher pulled me aside at recess and said, with this boy who was in my class, his name was Michael. They were together, and my teacher said, your mom told me about the dream you had. I talked to Michael. He said it was okay to talk to you. We wanted to let you know that his dad is dying of cancer, and or his dad is in the hospital with cancer, and we really appreciate your concern, but you don't need to worry. He has the best care possible, and we think you're a really good friend to Michael, but don't worry. I don't remember what they said to me exactly, but I just remember that they pulled me aside to essentially tell me that this is happening.
That's crazy.
I know, and it freaked me out, and I didn't want to sleep for weeks after that.
It freaked you out. And trying not to freak. Don't freak out.
Yeah, and I basically thought I made it happen, and I didn't want to sleep. But then
probably freaking out.
Yeah, and even thereafter, just whenever people, from a very young age, when people in my family or friends of family died, and there were funerals or shivas or something, I was always the one to go to just be the support person. And from 8, 9, 10, I was just always the person to go, partially because it fascinated me, and partially because I was just kind of that rock character in my family. So I would always go to funerals with people. And it just made sense to me. That's just what you did. When somebody died, you showed up. And So it was always in my nature to be that way.
I think it's amazing that you're almost was born to do this. You start thinking about all the different paths that are out there that we all can take, and just finding that right one that just sinks in. It's finding that love of your life. It just hits you one moment, and it seems like in your life this was just a path. I'm really happy that you found it, because there's so many people that are on the are trying to find what they're good at or what moves them. And it's amazing to see that you have found that at such a young age too. So now what brought you into then, okay, I volunteered, and then when did you find out about Death Doula? Because I only found that out probably maybe a year or two ago, but there was a thing out there that you could actually get a certificate in. And so what about you? How did you find out that this was a thing that you could actually make a living off of?
Well, I knew that I was very interested in home hospice. When I found out that there were essentially 3 options for places where people could die: in hospitals, in residential hospices, or in their homes, I knew I was interested in helping facilitate deaths in the home. And then so I moved on from volunteering and working with Hospice Toronto to volunteering and working with Home Hospice Association, which was more of a grassroots, newer organization, which is really developing and growing, and they're doing great things. And I found out through them that there was such a thing as a death doula, because they do death doula training, and I was like, I'm sold. I just found out through them that they train death doulas and what a death doula was, and it just made perfect sense to me again. So I was sold.
What exactly is a death doula for people listening?
Well, I kind of always go back to what I find really interesting is the origins of the word doula. Is kind of means servant or to serve. And a doula, a traditional doula, a birthing doula, helps guide or bring somebody into the world. So a death doula alternately would help guide or bring somebody out of the world. I kind of try and sum it up in three kind of major roles. The first one is sitting vigil. So you sit bedside, you offer respite to the family, and you hold space for the dying person. The second one is death planning, which is the who, what, when, where, why, smells, sights, tastes, and sounds for when the person is actively dying. So you try and get those things ready for when the person is actively dying so that they can have their wishes met and they can have a good death. And the third piece is legacy work, which is what do you want to leave behind and how can I help you? And then there is actually kind of like a huge fourth piece, which is what do you want to happen with after you die, and how can I help that happen? Because there's a lot happening now in terms of like the home funeral movement, and a lot of people are wanting that to happen, and we're seeing that happen more and more. And death doulas are helping with that more and more as well.
I'm interested. What goes on with the house funeral?
A home funeral, well, I'm actually less knowledgeable in that, but things like people don't know that like you can wash the body of your loved one after they die, and you can keep death doulas are now being trained to preserve a body within the home for a couple of days so that you can have visitation and the funeral kind of within the home, and instead of like just having the body rushed out of the house, which is what we traditionally do.
So it's almost going full circle, because I'm guessing that's probably what they did prior to
Exactly.
Yeah, the funeral homes and stuff. Wow.
Exactly.
Amazing.
The death doula is kind of an old concept, right? It's not. This isn't like a revolutionary thing. This is something that's probably happening around the world and was happening years and years ago, that where we cared for our dying, and we cared for our dying in the home, and we guided our dying out of the world with care and love and compassion, and we didn't just send them into an institution.
Yeah, I would imagine that it would add something to the family if they want that. If they feel like they're missing a part, because sometimes a person dies. Like, let's just talk. I'll just go over how my grandmother, she ended up dying in the hospital, and at that point, you're like, okay, what do I do now? And it's like they take care of the rest. The body's kind of taken to the funeral home, and they kind of handle it from there. And back in the day, ancient times, we used to do that ourselves. And I
Right.
think that is an aspect. There's something to that ritual of taking the body, taking care of it, cleaning it, doing whatever you
Right,
need to do.
exactly. As soon as I found out that, like, after my mother is still very much alive, but as soon as I found out that it was actually Caitlin Doty who was speaking at the International Death Symposium, and one of the things she spoke to was that, like, we can clean the bodies of our loved ones after they die. And I was like, oh my goodness. As soon as I found that out, I thought, like, I want to do that for my mother when she does die. I want to be the last one to touch her. I want to be the one to clean her body. Like, I want that. I want to do that for her. I want to do that for me. Like, what a beautiful kind of rite of passage.
Yeah, and there's obviously some people in society and family that don't want to do that stuff, and that's obviously okay. That's accepted. But there are those who kind of rise up out of everybody else, and you can kind of see it. And obviously, you saw it when you were a child and growing up, and even now. But there are those people who kind of rise up and naturally take those roles. And shout out to all you people who do that. We don't sometimes think about it, and things are just, I guess they're considered normal when you grow up in a family and you see people do things, but those people have a certain special thing, and that's needed. And obviously, in society, those people who take care of their families or take care of others during these times or feel comfortable doing all those things, like that's and I guess the people who appreciate it the most are the ones who don't want to do those things. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's an amazing thing.
I'm curious too, because I keep hearing how like the baby boomers are dying, and so there's going to be like this death boom that's going to be
Yeah, a
happening.
boomer crisis.
Oh, okay. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, there is a huge generation of people who are going to be dying. Our medical system is not equipped to handle it. And we have, therefore, also a huge generation of people who are going to become caregivers. The workforce is not prepared to handle what's going to happen to a generation of people who are going to become caregivers. We know what happens to absenteeism and presenteeism in the workplace when people become caregivers. It's just like there's going to become a crisis. So we need to start accessing resources like death doulas and home hospice, and we need to see dialogue in politics about palliative care and end of life care and end of life resources. I mean, I'm scared.
Yeah, well, I'm feeling that's why death doula is like that's becoming such a big hot topic, and the thing that people are getting trained to do is because there is this looming crisis that's coming. And so I don't fully even understand it, but it seems like you do because you're more scared than I am.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping, something beautiful can come out of it. And I think the death positivity movement is part of it, right? And part of the beautiful thing that might be coming out of it is that we are going to have to face death as a society. We are going to have to face the need for resources and the need for diversification of resources and the need to move away from the institutionalization of death. And so hopefully we do that gracefully and we do that in a compassionate way and in a knowledgeable way and in a resourceful way. And I mean, that could be happening. I hope that's what's happening. There are lots of agencies popping up that are training death doulas, and it's happening. Like I know with Home Hospice Association, they're continuing to do their training, and the demand is there. So I know in the United States right now, death doula is coming close to becoming a regulated term. Once that happens, I think Canada will follow suit. Once it's a regulated term, I think people will take it more seriously, and it'll be become more employable.
Well, that's beautiful. I think that's it's amazing. It's amazing that like there are those people out there that are seeing the curve of what's going to be coming up and to prepare. And I hope that you said Canada does make it a registered term. So yeah, like it's important, just like nurses or teachers. This is just another career that you need to regulate. You need to sort of make sure people have the best training possible to be employed in the field. And so like the way you're talking, you're very knowledgeable. I'm really excited for when you do graduate. So when are you going to be finished your program?
Within the next couple months. I had to take a brief medical leave. So I'm hoping to finish my coursework within the next couple months and then get my candidacy will be official.
Well, it's got to be exciting. Does that feel like, are you feeling it yet that you're almost done?
I hope so. I mean, I feel like I've been doing it for a very long time, to be honest. So in some ways it feels like I'm almost done, and in some ways it feels like nothing's going to change. But something will change because it'll be more official for sure.
That's funny. Yeah, I know. Like, it wasn't until I went up on stage and actually, graduated from my PhD that it really hit me. Like, and all the sort of the sacrifices you make and all the journey itself, like the full journey of everything that you've done. And just it hit me, and the losses that I've suffered along the way that helped move me there. So yeah, you never really know when it happens, like when you're done. But hopefully something does happen where you can appreciate like how far you've come in the journey and just what you're able to do with even your loss, which I would love to talk about because you were really young when you had your first loss, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it was your grandmother, is that right?
It was my grandmother, yeah. I considered her to be a parent for sure, but she was biologically my grandmother.
And so what happened with her? Like, were you able to sit with her? Was it like wasn't a sudden death? Was it like more of a slow death?
No, it wasn't a sudden death. She developed cancer. I don't even, to be honest, know how old she was. I think she was in her 70s, and she developed cancer. So it was like over the course of probably a couple of months, and it was in the summer. So I was in between junior high and high school, and I remember the whole time I didn't cry. The whole time she was sick, I didn't cry because I thought if somebody has to be the one not crying, otherwise who's going to take care of the crying people? And so I didn't cry the whole time she died. She was dying, rather. Sorry. And I remember the day she died. I woke up. I was supposed to go to work. I was working at a camp, and I said to my mom, we called her Guggy. I called her Guggy, and I was like, Guggy's going to die today. I'm coming to the hospital. I'm not going to work. And my mom's like, you have go to work and then come to the hospital. I said, no, I'm not going to work today. I'm coming to the hospital. Guggy's going to die today. And she's like, just go to work and come to the hospital after. And I was like, no, I'm coming to the hospital. So we argued about it. And then I didn't go to work, and I came to the hospital, and it's a good thing I did, because my grandmother died that day and I would have been at work when she died. But I watched her take her last breath, which was really amazing, really beautiful. Another like privileged moment for me, which is really cool, because so we walked in the room and she kind of smirked, I guess, with her like last bit of energy. And she, at one point near the end of the day, like her eyes shot open, but they were like very pale, because people lose pigment in their eyes when they're at the end of life. And they like scanned the room between where the wall hits the ceiling. They scanned through the ceiling, through the wall. And then she took her last breath and closed her eyes, and that was it. And I remember thinking in that moment, because I was definitely like an atheist, and I was like, I don't know if I can believe in nothing anymore, just because of the way she stared through the ceiling. And because of what I had just witnessed. It was very interesting. And since that moment, I definitely have not believed in nothing anymore, just because I think death is really powerful and profound. So yeah, I got to witness her last breath, and I felt really privileged for that. And I got to be there for her dying, and I always used to sing to her. She'd ask me to sing to her, and I feel like actually her death was my first experience as a death doula.
And yeah, well, it seems like it. And what would you used to sing to her? Like, what songs did she want?
Oh, Pennies from Heaven, which is like an old Bing Crosby song. I actually have a tattoo of an upside down umbrella from the song, because it talks about how every time it rains pennies from heaven. And so make sure your umbrella's upside down so you can catch the pennies from heaven, and trade the pennies for sunshine and flowers. So basically the idea is that it rains for a reason. So that was the main song she'd asked me to sing to her.
What was her connection with that song? Did she have like others that she lost, or was she just like trying to
No,
communicate with you
I
something?
guess it was, I feel like she was trying to communicate with me something. I think it was like, in retrospect, it was a very good parting message for me. It was a very good, helpful thing to leave me with, the idea that like, rain, bad things happen, or like dark days happen, and they happen for a reason, and it's okay. It's going to be okay. So I think that was really helpful. It was a helpful thing. My upside down umbrella is there to collect pennies when it rains and trade them for sunshine and flowers. So
Yeah.
it was pretty helpful. Yeah. In retrospect, it was very helpful. It's a helpful kind of mantra.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, I think, grandparents and like people older than us, they can do things that we don't really know until later on. Like,
Yeah.
their worth, kind of thing. So did you get that tattoo because of that, or did you like that song on your own?
I got the tattoo because of my grandma, because of the song my grandma asked me to sing to her. But I actually got the tattoo when one of my dogs died. I get tattoos when I'm a crazy dog lady, and so I tend to get tattoos whenever one of my dogs dies, to kind of commemorate that death. And then I had wanted, and so I was very sad that my dog had died, and I needed to remember that it rains for a reason. So I got the upside down umbrella also to honor my grandmother. I have lots of tattoos to honor my grandmother, though. Although I'm sure she wouldn't be pleased about that.
Why? She didn't have any tattoos herself?
No, definitely not.
That's beautiful to hear too, that you have dogs and you love dogs. I know Sean here is a big dog lover. And we were talking about like other people that come on the podcast on how impactful they are to our lives. And so for you, when your dogs died, how is that different from maybe when your grandmother died?
It's really interesting because it's like there's a lot of mixed feelings that happen when a human being dies. And when a dog dies, there are less mixed feelings because it's just like pure love that you exchange with a dog. I had like a lot of guilt when my grandmother died for all the times that I should have spent with her. And I had a lot of, human beings are flawed. So there were things about my relationship with my grandmother that were less than ideal, as I think everybody has with the people who raise them. But like, I don't know, but with my dogs, I am able to like take that love I had for a dog and pass it and extend it to another dog, share it with another dog to honor the dog I've lost. Whereas like, you can't do that with a grandma.
Yeah, it makes sense. I get what you're trying to say. It's humans are complex, and there's lots of different variables, and there's a back and forth, and it's very complicated, and
Mm-hmm.
I think also like you're looking at this from, you're the guy, you're the guardian angel, you're the caregiver, you're the primary, parent essentially for these animals. And I think that might be a little bit different
Mm-hmm.
relationship, maybe like a human, parent and child, maybe that type of relationship, which you haven't experienced on the human level, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the animal level, yeah. So I know what you're saying for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how many dogs have passed away?
Well, so I fostered dogs for the Humane Society, and I am the person who walks in. I'm like, who's the hardest to foster? Okay, I'll take like the cluster seizure epileptic dog, and so I've also been there for like the death of like my dad's dog. I'm the person who shows up again when people I love pets are dying. So it's just another way in which I'm a death doula. So I've been there for the death of I'm just counting now my two childhood dogs, and then I tend to rescue senior dogs, so I don't have them as long. My two childhood dogs, my foster dog, my last rescue dog, and my dad's dog. So I've been there for the death of about 5 or 6 dogs. Yeah, it's pretty profound. It's pretty intense. Yeah.
That's a lot of loss because
It's a lot of loss.
you care about these people and these animals, and you're just like there, like
I want to be
I've
there. Like, I want to be
yeah.
there. I don't want them to be alone, and I know that I can be calm and solid in that moment, maybe not right after, but I know that I can be like I can hold space for them while they're dying. I know that I can do that. I know that I'm good at that. And so that's what I do.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And again, it seems like you're just comfortable being there, whereas I'm sure a lot of people, it's fearful. It is a scary thing
Mhm.
sometimes, and that's the last place I want to be. Like, it's like going to a dentist. You don't really want to
Exactly.
be
Yeah.
there, but like you're comfortable there. That's something. And when I was sitting with my grandmother, I thought about that. I thought, because there
Mhm.
was always the question. Okay, I know I talk to people who do hospice. I can read about it, but can I sit with a dying person? And
Mhm.
I felt good because I was like, I can do this. At least with my
Yeah.
family member, I can do this. So
Mhm.
I think that's a
Chances are, if you can do it with
yeah.
your family member, you could do it with a stranger.
Oh wow, yeah. Well, that just shows you how much fear there is that people have even our people sitting with their family members, which is
Mhm.
crazy. But it's okay. It's natural. It's like, I'm not knocking you if you're scared of those things. That's okay,
Of
because there's
course.
people
Yeah.
like Kayla who can come in and help you.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so do they in your program, do they just talk about human loss or do they also talk about being a death doula for pets too?
In like at Home Hospice Association, they briefly touch on pet loss, but they have a program. They do have a program called the Bellow Project, which helps facilitate keeping the pet with the dying person. So not really being a death doula for dying animals, but for helping dying people keep their pets. Because one of the first things that happen when a family is taking care of a dying person is they can't take care of the pet too, right? So they get rid of the pet. When like that's sad. It's sad and undignified. Like a dying person deserves to have their pet with them. And
Yeah, that I'm just thinking about that. Like, man, that
yeah,
makes
people
so
don't
much.
think about things like that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so Home Hospice Association has a program called the Bellow Project, which helps try and keep the pet with the dying person for as long as possible, and then helps try and find a match for the pet for after the dying person has died, so that they keep the pet out of the rescue system. And so that the dying person has the peace of knowing where their pet's going, which I think is a really beautiful and profound program and very needed.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I never thought of that myself until you said that. And because the animals, they help us. They help us emotion regulate. They help us with the transition. And like they're their own death doulas, right? Like
Yeah.
they're good at sitting with our suffering.
Yeah, I know that if I found out I was dying and then somebody said, "And your pet's got to go," I'd say, "Then I want to die now."
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, man, that's my
Mhm.
baby. Where I can't just drop him off somewhere, like, just
Yeah,
like
exactly.
who knows? I think about
Mhm.
that. I have thought about that if I suddenly croak or just, get by a car or something, who's gonna take care of my dog? I mean, I have like
Exactly.
good family system and friends around me that I don't think they throw him in a shelter, but you think about those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do know that, like, if you go online, I don't know them offhand, but there are pet hospices. There are, I'm sure, death doula type resources for dying animals. I know it exists.
Yeah, actually, I want it's one of my dreams to get this guy Stephen Kotler on. He essentially has a dog hospice that him and his wife set up. But yeah, they do that, and he wrote a book, and in his book he talks a lot about what it's like, essentially having a revolving door of death, because like
Yeah.
they take the worst of the worst, and like the pack will thin out and then get bigger and thin out and get bigger, but
Yeah.
they're always around it. So I'd love to have him
Yeah.
on. But yeah, that's it's starting to get prevalent, and I think that this is in today's day and age, like these movements are happening. Even talk about death doulas. I think we talked about how there's going to be a huge influx of baby boomers passing away, dying. So
Mhm.
they're going to want other options. A lot of them are not going to want to die in a facility or in a
Exactly.
hospice. So this is, to provide this option to people at large. That's a great thing.
Exactly. And we know there is research. There's a great publication by the Vanier Institute. It was called Death Dying in Canadian Families. I'm not quite sure what the reissue is called, but it talks about the impact of a good death on communities at large. And we know that good deaths leave lasting impacts on the health on like positive lasting impacts on the health of families and communities at large. So we need to start striving to have better deaths.
Yeah, take away like maybe some of the bereaved's guilt or things that they wish they could have done better, or just to not see them suffer so much. And
Exactly.
those are the people that are part of the community as you move forward. So yeah, it's amazing the impact it can have. And now I'm glad we're talking about it some more, and more people are raising awareness like you are. And so the one thing you're doing is Death Cafe. So can you explain that, and why this is important?
Yeah, Death Cafés are super exciting. I love them. So Death Cafés are just open forum conversations about dying and death. They're not support groups. They're not for people who are actively grieving. They're for anybody and everybody to just come and talk about dying and death. They're trying to remove the stigma and the taboo around dying and death, and about talking about dying and death. Usually, so people just come and we do a brief intro, which introduces the movement. It's an international movement that started in the UK by a gentleman named John Underwood. And people just come and sit down and start chatting about dying in death. At the ones that I've held, we have conversation starters that are questions like, what's the last song you'd like to hear before you die? What does legacy mean to you? Would you like, well, who would you like to be with you when you die? And it's really just to get people thinking about and talking about dying in death.
That's a wonderful idea, because oftentimes the only time we kind of think about death is when someone dies near us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this is tremendous, because this is the second part of what life is, and that's death.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't think about it, we don't mull it over, we don't toss that idea in our head back and forth, we don't really get to know it, we don't really get used to it. And again, not even thinking about how we would want our death. And so I think that it's and again, shifting it, because it's a heavy word, so shifting, trying to open up that heavy word and that negative connotation around it into a stimulating environment where you can actually ask those questions and not look like a weirdo. Because like if you go on the normal street today, and if I told my friend, oh, I'm going to a death doula, or I'm going to a or I'm going to a death doula, or I'm going to a death cafe, they'd be like, look at me a little bit odd, like, are you okay?
Yeah.
So I think breaking out of that idea is important, and so this is a great idea. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. I always say the time to start advocating for end of life rights and choices are long before you need them. Because when you when you are hit, when you find out you're dying, you're hit with decisions and choices a mile a minute, and it's kind of too late to advocate for half of them. And so talking about dying in death early on and thinking about dying in death early on is really beneficial to everybody. But also, I find it really liberating. People think what I do is morbid, and I don't think so. I don't feel that way. I don't think that way at all. I find that dealing in death is a really liberating thing to do. I don't fear death. I don't walk around fearing death. I don't live my life fearing death. I know what people fear. I know what people regret the most on their deathbeds, and I get to live my life in line with those values, which is like, what a gift. I'm not, if I died tomorrow, I wouldn't die with regrets, because I know what people regret on their deathbeds, and I live my life every day with that in mind.
What's some of the most common regrets people have as they're dying?
I wish I had let myself be happier. I wish I had spent more time on my relationships, or I wish I had spent more time with my family. I wish I hadn't worked so hard is a big one.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? We work so hard to get ahead, to have money and the sense of freedom when you retire, but usually when that time comes, you said you may be dying. And so you don't get to really enjoy life because you work so hard to accumulate this money. That's so interesting. Yeah. So really have make time to play, make time to have fun in life. And don't take it so seriously. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's very beautiful.
Yeah. So death reaffirms life, because, by thinking about death, you're actually reaffirming what's important in life, because you're because why? So rather than, so if a person says, I wish I didn't work so much, what they're missing is, when they worked, when, whatever, the child had a piano recital, or, they took an extra shift at work to earn more money when, they could have, I don't know, whatever, went to a Blue Jays game or something. So that's again, I think that's the key part there, is that, rather than fearing a word, understanding that, hey, if we unwrap it and how it is according to our life, it can actually reaffirm how to live a better life.
Exactly. It's not about death and dying. It's about life and living. It's like they're really one and the same.
I like that. That's really good. Yeah. It's very catchy. Yeah. It's a good slogan. Yeah. But yeah, finding meaning in life now, not waiting until you're done working.
Absolutely.
So this has been a very beautiful conversation. I've learning a lot. I'm learning a lot about you and how beautiful you are and how you're able to sit with suffering so easily. And it wasn't really like you were trained. It was a natural progression for you. And
absolutely.
In this life. And that's interesting for me. Just like your meaning is by able to sit with people who are dying, and helping them find solitude and space to maybe for the first time be free or be open about their fears and what they wish they could have done. Wow. So good for you for doing what you do. We always like to ask in the podcast if you ever had any dreams of anyone who's died. So either your grandmother, maybe any of your dogs, or any clients that have passed on.
Yeah, mostly my grandmother. I have like two kind of recurring dreams about my grandmother. One of them is that she's about to die and I can't get to her. And then one of them is that and one of them is similar, that she's like about to die, or like she's about to die again, but it's been like years and I haven't seen her. And I'm like suddenly overcome with like guilt for having not seen her for years, and she's about to die, and like, and I don't know why I haven't seen her for years, and I've just found out. So those are the two kind of recurring dreams I have about my grandmother. And I just found out this week because I was telling my sister that I was doing this podcast. She has the same dream about my grandmother, that she hasn't seen her for years, and she just finds out that she's going to die.
Oh wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
And so what do you take that to be or to mean?
I have no idea, to be honest.
Yeah, it's according to like sort of some of the research I've done at Brock with like some of these negative dreams. It could be trauma, it could be even unresolved feelings of guilt or regret or even blame.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that you had some regrets when it came to your grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And so it could be just that, because if it's recurring, there's something there that hasn't solidified in your waking life yet. That's something that we do know, right? When it comes to recurring dreams, you see that a lot with you with PTSD. It's like these recurring dreams happen until the symptoms can get under control. So for you, there's got to be something there about those, you said those regrets that you probably haven't really fully worked on.
Okay.
That's causing them to be. And so a great way to maybe even change it up is it's called dream rescripting. And so what you do is you take your dream, whatever it was that you want to do, like maybe you can't get to her, but then you change the outcome of the ending of the dream. And so you can either, prolong it, or maybe she comes back. I don't know what you want to do, but that's one thing you can do, and you make it something positive, and then you rehearse that during the weeks, for a week, and then those dreams will tend to decrease.
When do I rehearse it? When do I do that?
When you're awake.
Oh, okay. So I like visualize it.
Yeah, you'll visualize it. Yeah, and then from there, what can happen is those maybe decrease, and then what may occur is then maybe they change to something more positive. And so I've seen this a lot, even with people who have negative dreams of their deceased, and then they do these techniques or they work on the issue that the dream is sort of talking about, and then the dreams change to something more positive.
Okay, cool.
What you want. Yeah, what you want. And it's just like her maybe singing that song to you this time.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting that even your sister has the same dream. So I don't know if there's a similar issue there that you guys can talk about together and see like what's going on.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem. And so as we like to wrap up the podcast, we ask one question, and that is, if you could have a dream tonight of anyone who's died, what would that look like to you?
Oh, I'd have a dream. I dream about my grandmother for sure. But I'd hang out with her now, like in my present day, and I'd talk to her as an adult, and like adult to adult. I'd just hang out with her as I am today.
And do you want her like the same age she was when she died, or do you want her a little younger?
Maybe I'd have her younger. Like I'd maybe hang out with her like two 33-year-olds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. No gray hair.
Yeah.
Will you even recognize her?
I don't know. Maybe not. That would be weird because she always had that magical silver hair. So. But I would. Oh no, maybe because she's so magical as a grandma, so she'd still be my older grandma, but she would have me as an adult. I think it would be so cool to like talk to her as I am today.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. It'd be so amazing. And where would you want it to be taking place?
Just in Toronto at like, I don't know, because so many of the places she took me to as a kid are gone, and that's like one of the weird things that always weirds me out is like all of these places that I associate with her are just like gone. Can I bring back one of the places we used to go to together?
Of course, it's a dream. It's a dream. Bring it back.
Okay, I would like bring back this place called the Coffee Mill. That is a little like Hungarian coffee shop that used to exist in Toronto.
That's cool. And what would you guys drink or eat there?
I'd have like a iced mocha, and we'd have, I don't know, like tuna salad or something pretty boring, but just like exactly like it was when I was a kid. We'd just sit in a booth, and that part would be like it was when I was a kid.
That sounds special. That sounds amazing to be able to share a moment like that. You know, a nice happy moment.
Sure.
And I hope you get that. And just be patient with yourself. We can be hard on ourselves sometimes when we have these negative dreams, but with hopefully with the advice Josh gave you, you can start to turn those around and really re-script your own dreams. Yeah,
thank you very much.
No problem. Kayla, can you before we finish, I just want to say thank you for coming on. It's incredible. We really enjoy talking to people in the field, and especially people who are young and doing new things that can help service the community at large. It's a real special thing, and seems like you had this gift from the beginning. We'll call it a superpower that you discovered along the way, and I'm glad that you fostered that strength. And that's so interesting how you said that. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening out there who, as a kid, kind of had that in them, and then they developed it as they got older. So I'm glad you had that superpower, and you're just, again, servicing the people at large. Could you shout out your handles, your website, so people can find you?
Yeah, for sure. So it's www.gooddeath.ca. Instagram is Good Death Doula. Facebook is Good Death Doula. And my email is kayla@gooddeath.ca.
Amazing. That's awesome. Once again, thank you for coming on, and thank you for all the listeners out there. You can check us out, our platform at griefdreams.ca for more information on the topic. We added a donation button, and there are perks to those who donate. If you have Facebook, you can join the Grief Dreams group. You can share your dreams or hear more dreams of others. We are on Twitter and Instagram at Grief Dreams. Just send us a message and add us there. And also, if you have a chance, you can please rate us on iTunes. That does help with getting the website to more people. And as always, like to end with love and gratitude from us to you.
I have questions. I have introduced myself. You have introduced yourself. This is a very good conversation.